picture this. You're sitting on your couch, you've got your phone out, and you are just, mindlessly scrolling through your newsfeed after a really long day.
Oh, yeah. We've all been there.
Right. Just swiping past, like, photos of someone's lunch, maybe a video of a golden retriever doing something funny, and then...
The inevitable happens.
Exactly. Within maybe 3 minutes of scrolling, you see the phrase, social justice.
Yeah. It's inescapable.
It really is everywhere. Maybe it's buried in this, like, furious all-caps rant from a politician on a late-night social media binge.
Or neatly packaged in one of those slick, highly produced corporate press releases.
Oh, right, the corporate buzzwords. Or maybe it's just the epicenter of a heated comment section debate that has completely spiraled out of control and, frankly, ruined someone's evening.
Yeah, which happens a lot. And depending on who is typing it, that term is framed as either an absolute moral imperative, a dangerous weapon, or just, completely empty corporate jargon.
It's heavily loaded, it's constantly misused, and almost invariably, it is tied to an incredibly angry modern political debate.
Yeah, it's one of those phrases that acts like a cultural tripwire, I think.
A tripwire, that's a good way to put it.
Right, because the moment you hear it, depending entirely on your background, your upbringing, or even just your daily media diet, your brain likely jumps to a whole set of prepackaged assumptions.
Yeah, for sure.
It carries immense, heavy, partisan political baggage. And because of that baggage, it's incredibly difficult to talk about what the words actually mean without someone in the room immediately going on the defensive.
Which is why today, for this deep dive, we are going to do something that might feel, well, incredibly difficult. But I think it is absolutely necessary.
It is.
We are going to completely strip away all of that modern 21st century baggage. We are taking a giant step entirely out of the current culture wars.
And our mission today is to examine how the concepts of social justice and righteousness are actually defined in this fascinating foundational document that you, the listener, shared with us.
Right. And we should name that source. What are we looking at today?
We are looking at a deeply researched academic and theological paper. It's titled Social Justice and Righteousness: True Religion Requires Obedience by Chris R. Valasis.
Yes, and to accompany that text, we also have these two incredibly detailed, data-driven infographics.
Right, and they summarize both the theology and the history of these concepts as they appear throughout ancient scripture.
It's a sweeping look at how a very old worldview tackles a very modern-sounding problem.
Exactly.
But, before we get into the weeds of this text, we really need to establish a strict ground rule for this deep dive.
Well, absolutely, the neutrality guarantee.
The neutrality guarantee.
Right.
Because the source material deals with terms that are just, completely radioactive in today's political climate. We are explicitly stating right now, we are not taking any sides.
Not at all.
We are not endorsing any modern political platforms, whether that's left-wing, right-wing, or anywhere in between. We're not here to debate current events, elections, or modern public policies.
Right. Our sole job today is to impartially report on the ideas contained in this original text.
Just the text.
Just the text. We are exploring how this specific ancient biblical framework defines justice, looking at its historical and theological context.
We're going to lay out the author's arguments and the data provided, unpack the underlying logic, and then...
And then we are going to step back.
Exactly. We leave it entirely up to you to draw your own conclusions about what it means for the world today.
That is the punchline.
So, keeping that neutrality rule firmly in mind, let's start at the very beginning. If social justice isn't just a modern political invention, which, by the way, is the very first thing this text argues, what exactly is it?
Right, because before we can understand how justice works in this ancient framework, we really have to unlearn how our modern culture defines the word.
Yeah, we have to clear the slate. So how does the author define it?
Well, the primary thesis hits this right out of the gate. The text argues that social justice, in the biblical sense, is not some secular add-on to faith. It's not a modern sociological concept that got awkwardly glued onto ancient religion.
Yeah.
And it is not merely political activism.
So what is it?
It defines justice as covenant faithfulness made visible in the world.
Okay, let's pause on that phrase for a second because it's dense. Covenant faithfulness made visible. What does that actually look like in practice?
It means that the relationship between God and humanity, according to this framework, isn't just an invisible internal feeling. It has a physical, societal shape.
A shape. Interesting.
Yeah, the author points out that our modern tendency is to separate doctrine from ethics. Like we desperately want to separate private spirituality from public righteousness.
Oh, absolutely. We love doing that.
The text actually diagnoses this condition. It calls it compartmentalization.
Compartmentalization. So, like, I keep my spiritual life, my private prayers or my internal beliefs in this neat little box over here.
Right.
And then my business practices, or how I treat my employees, or how I talk about my neighbor on the internet. That goes in a totally different box over there.
Exactly. And the two boxes never touch.
Right. And we do this because it's comfortable, isn't it?
It is incredibly comfortable.
Yeah.
But the text makes a rather striking claim about this comfort.
What's that?
It says that a faith that ignores outward societal obedience isn't actually mature religion at all. The author calls it religious insulation against the claims of God.
Religious insulation. Wow. That is a brilliant way to phrase it.
It really gets to the core of the issue.
It does. It's the idea of using private rituals to actually hide from public moral obligations. It makes me think of an analogy.
Let's hear it.
Imagine someone who obsessively reads fitness manuals.
Okay, sure.
Like they buy the most expensive, moisture-wicking gym gear.
Oh, the really nice breathable stuff.
Exactly. They know the precise biomechanics of a bicep curl. They have very strong opinions on protein powders.
Naturally.
But they refuse to ever actually step foot in a gym or lift a single weight.
That captures the dynamic perfectly.
Right.
They possess all the internal knowledge, all the right vocabulary, and all the preparation. But there is zero visible reality to their supposed passion.
And if you looked at that person, you wouldn't say they were a bodybuilder. You'd say, you aren't actually into fitness. You're just into the idea of fitness.
Yeah, you like the aesthetic of it.
Right. And the text is arguing that true religion without public justice is just as absurd.
Think about it for a second. How easily our society divorces the idea of being a good person on the inside from the reality of doing good, just things on the outside.
We give ourselves a tremendous amount of credit for our internal feelings of goodwill, don't we? Even if we never act on them.
Oh, we constantly grade ourselves on our intentions rather than our impact.
Yes.
But the text is completely uncompromising here. It insists that God does not delight in religious performance that is disconnected from obedience.
So it's a package deal.
Completely. True religion unites worship, truth, justice, mercy, and humility into a single unbreakable fabric.
You can't just pick one.
No, you cannot have the internal devotion without the external action, because, in this worldview, the external action is the only reliable proof that the internal devotion actually exists.
Okay, so if justice isn't a modern invention, and it's not just harboring internal good vibes, where does it actually come from?
Well, the author doesn't just offer a philosophical definition here. They provide a mountain of raw historical data in these infographics.
Yeah, I was looking at those, and the numbers they present are frankly staggering.
They really are. The foundational premise the author builds on is that justice doesn't begin with human philosophy or sociology.
Where does it begin then?
It begins in the very character of God. The infographics pull specific data points, referencing texts like Psalms 145.17 and 89.110, which describe God as inherently righteous, holy, faithful, and impartial.
But it goes beyond just abstract adjectives, right?
Way beyond. Deuteronomy 10 explicitly says this God takes no bribes and actively defends the fatherless, the widow, and the sojourner.
And sojourner is an ancient term for the immigrant or the foreigner.
Exactly, the vulnerable outsider.
And the infographics back this up with hard quantitative data. We're talking about over 100 distinct verses in the Old Testament alone commanding justice specifically for the poor and the vulnerable.
Right, and over 50 times, God explicitly calls his people to defend widows, orphans, and foreigners.
Over 50 times. I mean, this clearly isn't a fringe topic or a minor footnote in the text.
Not at all. It's the central nervous system of their societal law.
The central nervous system, I like that.
Yeah, the text points out that the Mosaic Law actually embeds this divine character directly into human society. It wasn't just vague, inspirational advice to, be nice to people.
Like a bumper sticker.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It was rigid, enforceable legal code.
Give me some examples of that.
Well, for example, Exodus 22 has strict regulations protecting the poor from exploitation by creditors.
Okay.
Leviticus 25 institutes complex rules regulating debt, labor, and land ownership, specifically designed to prevent permanent generational poverty.
Wow, so they were thinking structurally even back then.
Yeah. Very structurally. And Leviticus 19 insists on honest commerce mandating literally honest weights and measures in the marketplace.
Wait, let's dig into that last one for a second. Honest weights and measures.
Yeah.
If the ancient law literally regulated how to handle debt and how to physically weigh goods in the local market, does that mean economics and spirituality were essentially the exact same thing to them?
They were completely inseparable.
That is wild.
The author uses a specific phrase for this: holy order. Justice isn't just abstract legalism. It is God's character imprinted onto human social structures.
Imprinted onto the structures so you can't decouple them.
Right. The underlying logic here is that the same God who commands sacrifices and religious festivals is the exact same God who commands fair courts and honest scales.
So to cheat someone in business wasn't just a white-collar crime.
No, it was an act of profound religious heresy.
Imagine how revolutionary that concept must have been in the ancient Near East.
Oh, it would have turned their whole understanding of religion upside down.
You'd have all these surrounding cultures whose deities basically operated like mob bosses.
Right, protection rackets.
Exactly. Feed the gods, offer the sacrifice, perform the elaborate ritual, and the gods will leave you alone, or maybe, give you rain for your crops.
Very transactional.
But the text presents a deity who supposedly cares deeply about whether a peasant's grain transaction in a dusty marketplace is fair.
A God who gets offended if a merchant's scale is artificially weighted to cheat a customer out of a few ounces of flour.
That radically redefines what the divine is actually interested in, doesn't it?
It really does. It means you can't ruthlessly exploit your neighbor all week and then just buy off God's favor with a really nice sheep on the Sabbath.
Uh-huh. Right. A premium sheep doesn't cancel out the exploitation.
Exactly. The text clearly states, and I'll quote it here, "The social dimension of righteousness is woven into the fabric of Israel's life with God."
The spiritual and the economic are bound together.
Completely bound.
But of course, human nature is incredibly consistent throughout history.
Unfortunately, yes.
If the law was so clear, if it was literally written down in stone not to cheat people and to take care of the vulnerable, we have to ask, did the people actually follow it?
And looking at the text, the answer is a resounding no.
Which brings us to the era of the prophets, because these prophets didn't just show up to predict the future.
No, they arrived on the scene precisely because the society was completely failing to execute this justice.
That's a crucial distinction. The prophets were largely social critics, weren't they?
Very much so. The infographics note that there are more than 30 prophetic passages directly and often aggressively condemning injustice and empty ritual.
Empty ritual.
Right. They were critiquing what the author calls empty religion.
We're talking about heavy hitters here, too.
Oh, yeah.
You have Isaiah saying God is literally weary of their religious festivals because their hands are full of blood.
Yeah.
You have Amos, specifically in Amos 5.24, saying, let justice roll down like waters.
A famous line.
Very famous. You have Micah boiling the entire religious enterprise down to three things. Act justly, love mercy, and walk humbly.
Right.
And you have Jeremiah condemning people who put all their trust in the physical temple building while simultaneously oppressing the alien, the orphan, and the widow right outside its doors.
But this dynamic presents a really fascinating theological tension, I think.
What do you mean?
Well, why would God hate the very sacrifices and festivals that he himself previously commanded in the Mosaic Law?
Right. That does seem like a contradiction on the surface.
The author spends significant time addressing this. The text points out that God doesn't hate the ritual itself.
Okay.
He rejects the ritual when it is weaponized as a substitute for holiness.
I can see a listener pushing back on that, though. Let's look at it from the perspective of an ancient Israelite.
Sure.
Isn't showing up to the temple, offering the precise animal, and doing the festivals exactly what God asked for in the rule book?
Technically, yes.
So why is he suddenly weary of them? It almost seems like the divine goalposts are being moved.
It looks like moving the goalpost only if you've fallen into that trap of compartmentalization we talked about earlier.
Ah, keeping the boxes separate.
Exactly. The text argues that performing piety without repentance is a total sham.
A sham.
Yes. The ritual was always supposed to be the physical expression of a heart that was surrendered to God and, by extension, loving toward its neighbors.
But they disconnected it.
Completely. They had turned it into a transaction, a bribe.
They figured out how to hack the system?
Precisely.
Yeah.
They thought, if I perform this ritual flawlessly, God owes me protection, regardless of how I treat the widow down the street.
Wow.
And the text notes that God does not accept worship as a substitute for holiness.
Imagine the scene with Amos for a second. It's incredibly vivid when you think about it.
Oh, set the scene.
Okay, you have these people who are gathered for a festival. They are singing worship songs, conducting these grand, beautiful, sensory-rich liturgical assemblies.
The music is swelling, the incense is burning.
Exactly. And Amos, this rugged shepherd guy, is basically shouting them down.
Just interrupting the whole service.
Yeah, pointing out the temple doors to the streets outside, where those exact same worshipers are manipulating the vulnerable, running exploitative businesses, and cheating the poor.
The cognitive dissonance is staggering.
How could they sing so loudly while acting so poorly?
Well, the psychology behind it is actually quite simple, and the author touches on this.
Oh, really?
Yeah. When you are engaging in systemic injustice, you often feel a deep internal need to justify yourself.
So you overcompensate.
Exactly. You turn up the volume on your religious rituals to drown out the guilt of your social reality.
Oh, man. Turn up the volume to drown out the guilt. That hits hard.
The core message of the prophets is that ritual without obedience is deeply offensive to God.
Because it's hypocritical.
Yes. A people who offer meticulous sacrifices but abuse their neighbors aren't considered holy. The text explicitly labels them covenant breakers.
Covenant breakers. Now, if you are listening to this, you might be wondering at this point, okay, this intense focus on social justice, on the widows and the orphans and the poor, is this just an Old Testament thing?
That's a common question.
Right. Is it just a specific historical phase driven by angry prophets? Because the source material explicitly claims that Jesus and the New Testament church didn't leave this social framework behind.
No, they didn't. They actually intensified it.
They intensified.
They took the foundation and dug it even deeper. The author points out that Jesus denounces the religious leaders of his day, the Pharisees, for exactly the same hypocrisy the prophets attacked.
Okay, give me an example of that.
Well, in Matthew 23, Jesus points out that they are meticulously tithing herbs.
Herbs, like the spices.
Right. They're measuring out 10% of their mint, dill, and cumin.
Wow.
But they're completely neglecting what he calls the weightier matters of the law. Justice and mercy and faithfulness.
I really want to sit with that image for a second because the psychology of it is so familiar today.
The tithing of the mint.
Yeah. Think about how small a mint leaf is.
Tiny.
These leaders were so obsessed with the micro details of religious compliance that they were counting out individual leaves and seeds to give to God.
Just to make sure they hit exactly 10%.
That's like someone today meticulously sorting their recycling.
Okay, I like where this is going.
Like they wash out every single yogurt container, they tear the little plastic windows out of the pasta box.
Oh, yeah, really intense recyclers.
Exactly. But simultaneously, that same person is running a sweatshop that exploits hundreds of workers.
Wow.
They are hyper-focusing on this tiny, visible micro-compliance while completely ignoring their macro-exploitation.
It's the ultimate form of missing the forest for the trees.
Totally.
And by focusing on the mint leaves, they felt incredibly righteous. They could measure their obedience.
It's quantifiable.
Right. But Jesus argues that you cannot separate the details of worship from the sweeping demands of justice.
They go together.
Always. When asked to summarize the entire law, he says it is loving God and loving your neighbor.
The two commands are tethered together.
Exactly. And the author shows how we see the early church living this out in incredibly practical, structural ways.
Right. The infographics highlight the book of Acts, specifically Acts 2 and Acts 6.
Yeah, this wasn't just a group of people getting together for a spiritual seminar once a week.
No, they were sharing resources, ensuring honest distribution of food, and specifically organizing a system to care for widows who were being overlooked in the daily distribution.
They essentially built a micro-society based on these principles.
And then there is James 1.27, which the source material highlights prominently.
What does that one say again?
It says, religion that God our Father accepts as pure and faultless is this, to look after orphans and widows in their distress, and to keep oneself from being polluted by the world.
It's an incredibly action-oriented definition of religion, isn't
It's
it?
extremely.
Yeah.
But the author doesn't just list these good deeds. There is a crucial theological anchor to all this New Testament action that the text emphasizes. And it's a concept that might be new to a lot of people. It's called cruciform justice.
Yes. Cruciform simply means cross-shaped.
Cross-shaped.
Yeah. The text argues that the ultimate expression of justice in this framework isn't found in a courtroom, but at the cross.
Okay, unpack that a bit.
At the cross, justice and mercy meet perfectly. God doesn't ignore sin, so the demands of justice are fully satisfied.
Right.
But he also provides a way for sinners to be forgiven, so mercy is fully given.
And why does that theological concept matter for how someone acts in the world?
Because the author states that without the cross, Christian justice inevitably devolves into one of two things, either self-righteous activism or cynicism.
Self-righteous activism or cynicism, that is a profound diagnosis of how so many people burn out trying to do good.
It really is.
Let's unpack that. Self-righteous activism. That is when you think you are the pure, unblemished savior of the world.
Exactly. And everyone who disagrees with your methods is a villain who needs to be destroyed.
You become ruthless in your pursuit of a just cause because you don't see any flaws in yourself.
You entirely lack mercy.
Right. And on the flip side, cynicism happens when you realize you can't actually fix the world.
The problems are just too big.
The corruption is too deep. And so you just throw your hands up and give up entirely. You retreat into your private life.
Which is just another form of compartmentalization.
Exactly. But cruciform justice, according to this text, grounds a person's pursuit of justice in profound humility.
Yes. The person seeking justice for others recognizes that they themselves are deeply flawed and only live by the mercy they've received.
So they fight for justice, but they do it without turning their opponents into monsters.
That's the key.
So we've laid out the historical evidence. The Mosaic Law, the prophets yelling outside the temple, Jesus confronting the Pharisees, the early church organizing food pantries.
They've covered a lot of ground.
We have. But a massive question remains. If this blueprint for a just society is so clear, why does injustice actually happen in the first place?
Good question.
According to this framework, what is the root cause of the disease?
The author makes a very firm, unyielding claim here. Social evil is a spiritual problem, long before it ever becomes a structural one.
A spiritual problem first.
Yes, justice is inseparable from personal holiness. The text argues that things like idolatry, pride, greed, and unbelief are the root sins lying beneath all public injustice.
There is a quote from the text that hit me incredibly hard when I read it.
Which one?
False gods produce false societies.
Ah, yes. It's a powerful summary of their entire sociological theory, honestly.
It really is.
The argument is that modern debates constantly force us into a false choice.
How so?
We are told we have to choose between truth and compassion, or we are told we have to choose between addressing the human heart and addressing social structures.
Like it's an either scenario.
Right. You are either a person who cares about personal morality, or you are a person who cares about systemic change.
But let me jump in and play the skeptic for a second, because I can hear someone arguing against this.
Go for it.
If this text says the root problem is the human heart, if all societal evil is just downstream from internal pride and greed, doesn't that imply we shouldn't bother trying to fix unjust laws?
Ah, I see what you mean.
Like, if the system is just a reflection of a greedy heart, shouldn't we just focus on praying for people to become less greedy rather than doing the hard work of changing legislation?
The text explicitly rejects that kind of passive thinking.
Okay, good.
The author clarifies that social structures are highly relevant. After all, the prophets themselves attacked corrupt courts and exploitative economic policies.
Right, they weren't just praying in a corner.
Exactly. But the text is saying that trying to fix a societal structure without addressing the idolatry and greed driving it is like treating a symptom while ignoring the underlying disease.
It's like putting a fresh coat of paint on a house where the foundation is rotting.
That's a perfect analogy.
You can make it look better for a little while, sure. But eventually, the rot is going to bring the walls down.
Exactly. The system is broken because the humans running the system are spiritually broken.
Right.
The structures are morally shaped by what a society worships. If a society worships wealth, its economic structures will inevitably become exploitative no matter how many regulations you pass.
Because they will always find a loophole.
Always. The biblical framework demands an inside-out approach. The structure absolutely matters, but the structure is always downstream from the heart of the people building it.
Which makes perfect sense when you look at how this text maps justice across the entire timeline of human existence.
Oh, the grand narrative.
Yes, because the author in these infographics don't just give us a few isolated, cherry-picked verses.
No, it's a massive, overarching grand narrative arc.
And when you look at this arc, it completely reframes the whole conversation.
It is quite a sweeping overview. The infographics trace the concept of justice, literally from before time began to after time ends.
Literally the whole timeline.
Yeah, it proves that justice isn't a side quest or a tangent in the biblical story. It's the central spine of the narrative.
Let's trace that timeline because seeing the whole picture really changes how you view the individual parts.
Let's do it.
The text starts at the very beginning, eternity and creation.
Stage 1.
It argues that God creates a world intended for ordered goodness. Justice is baked into the creational design from day one because humans are made in the image of a perfectly just God.
Right. To be human is to have an innate, undeniable sense that things ought to be fair.
But that perfect order doesn't last. The narrative immediately introduces the fracture, the fall.
Stage 2.
Sin enters the world and fractures every relationship. And importantly, the text notes that systemic injustice flows directly from this initial fracture.
Because human pride mutates into a desire for domination.
Exactly.
Human fear mutates into the oppression of others.
Yeah.
The spiritual break causes a societal break.
So God initiates a rescue plan, which the text calls the covenant.
Stage 3.
God calls Abraham to form a specific people who will bless all nations. And it's fascinating that right from the start, the law's deep concern for the poor isn't an afterthought. It is a foundational pillar of that covenant.
Which leads directly into the concept of redemption.
Right. And look at how redemption is defined in this narrative.
It's really interesting.
The
This is a crucial point in the author's argument, and it completely shatters the compartmentalization idea we discussed earlier.
How so?
The exile, when Israel was conquered and deported, wasn't just because they worshiped the wrong God in the privacy of their homes.
Right.
The text argues that exile was the public judgment for a covenant breach that included widespread systemic injustice. The prophets made it clear. Trampling the poor led directly to national collapse.
God essentially evicted them from the land because of how they treated their poorest citizens.
That is a terrifying level of accountability.
It really is. But the story doesn't end in exile. The narrative moves to restoration, the promise of renewed hearts that will actually have the capacity to walk in God's ways.
Which sets the stage for the Messiah.
Right. Jesus arrives, and as we discussed, he saves by the cross and rules by grace, perfectly embodying that cruciform justice.
Which births the church.
A ninth stage.
And the author describes the church in a very specific way as a foretaste of the kingdom.
A foretaste.
It's supposed to be a new, visible community whose shared life visibly contradicts the world's standard patterns of greed and exploitation.
It's meant to be a preview trailer for how human society is actually supposed to function.
Exactly. A preview trailer.
And the narrative concludes with final judgment, the millennium, and eternity.
The final stages.
The text says God will ultimately judge every deed, expose every hidden abuse of power, and vindicate justice perfectly.
The ultimate hope presented here isn't just floating on clouds playing a harp.
No, it's a renewed physical world where oppression completely ends and perfect justice and peace dwell forever.
It's incredibly grounded.
You know, looking at this sweeping historical arc, it's like realizing that the background character in your favorite movie was actually the main protagonist the whole time.
Ah, that's a great way to look at it.
You thought justice was just a side plot for activists, but according to this text, it is woven into the very DNA of the entire story from Genesis to Revelation.
It is structurally central to the entire narrative framework. You simply cannot extract the demand for justice without unraveling the entire theology.
So, if this grand narrative is so clear, and it is so heavily documented with all this historical and textual data,
Why the confusion?
exactly. Why is there so much confusion today? Why did we have to set up that strict neutrality rule at the beginning of the show?
Well, the author anticipates this exact friction and takes time to directly confront several common misunderstandings.
Let's go through them.
Yeah, the author lays out 5 specific pushbacks they hear most often.
Okay, what's the first one?
The first major misunderstanding is the claim that social justice is purely a modern, secular political invention.
Which we've kind of already blown out of the water.
Right. The text refutes this simply by pointing to the sheer volume of biblical history we just traced. The ancient texts are utterly saturated with justice language long before modern sociology ever existed.
But let's look at the pushback from the religious side. You often hear people argue, if we talk too much about justice or social issues, we are abandoning the core spiritual message of the gospel.
The author says this is a fundamental category error.
A category error.
Yeah, the gospel, in this framework, transforms people internally so that they subsequently do justice externally.
So doing justice isn't the error.
No, the error is attempting to do justice while severing it from the grace and holiness that supposedly fuel it.
Got it. Okay, here's the third one. People say, God only cares about the state of the human heart, not social outcomes or politics.
Again, the text argues this is completely false. The heart shapes society.
Right.
If the heart is corrupt, the society will be unjust. Public injustice is repeatedly condemned by the prophets as a deeply spiritual issue. You cannot artificially separate them.
You know, here is one I hear a lot, especially in certain religious circles.
Which one?
Isn't all this talk about obedience and strict rules just legalism? People are terrified of legalism.
It's a valid fear, honestly, but the text makes a crucial distinction between the two.
How does it define them?
Legalism is trying to earn God's favor, or earn your own salvation by your flawless performance. It's a transaction.
Like trying to buy your way in.
Exactly. Obedience, on the other hand, is defined here as the grateful, natural response of covenant love to the grace you've already received.
Oh, that's a big difference.
It is. You don't do justice to get God to love you. You do justice because you recognize God already loves you and you want to reflect his character.
And finally, there is the misunderstanding that brings us right back to our ground rules.
Ah, yes.
The idea that biblical justice maps perfectly onto one specific modern political program.
The text emphatically says no. Biblical justice radically transcends our partisan ideologies.
It doesn't fit neatly into the left or the right.
Not at all. It sets moral boundaries and judges all human systems, left, right, and center, by a divine standard.
It holds a mirror up to all of them.
Exactly. The author specifically warns against the danger of baptizing partisan categories, meaning we shouldn't take our modern political preferences and try to slap a divine seal of approval on them.
Think about this dynamic in your own life for a second. Think about how often you hear people say, well, if you truly care about the gospel and spiritual things, you shouldn't be distracted by social issues.
Right.
Or, on the exact flip side, people who say, if you actually care about social issues and helping real people in the real world, you don't need to bother with these ancient, outdated, restrictive religious texts.
It's a tug of war.
It is. And this author is looking at the data and saying both sides are getting it entirely fundamentally wrong.
They are presenting a false dichotomy. The text refuses to let you choose between personal piety and public justice. It demands both.
So we've covered the theology, we've covered the history, the prophets, and the grand narrative arc.
We've dug deep.
We really have. Now we have to bring this down to earth. How does this ancient text demand action from you, the listener, in your everyday life?
What are the practical implications?
Exactly. What does it actually look like on a Tuesday?
Well, the author breaks this down into very practical daily arenas.
Okay. Let's hear them.
For leadership, the text argues that all authority is merely stewardship. Leaders don't own their positions. They are holding them in trust.
Stewardship, not ownership.
Exactly. Therefore, leaders are required to protect, serve, and tell the truth. They are strictly forbidden from ever using people merely as instruments or stepping stones for their own personal gain.
That alone would change a lot of modern corporate culture.
Oh, completely. The text also redefines discipleship. It changes the fundamental question a person asks themselves.
What's the old question?
Instead of asking, is this permissible? Which is basically asking, what is the absolute bare minimum I can get away with legally without getting in trouble? The new question becomes, does this action actively reflect the character of God?
Wow. That's a much higher bar.
It's a radically different lens.
Yeah.
But honestly, my favorite part of the practical application is what the author says about daily living.
Yes. The concept of ordinary faithfulness.
I love that phrase.
Me too. It highlights how beautifully, wonderfully mundane true justice actually is in practice.
Because when we hear the term social justice, we almost always think of leading a massive protest march, right?
Right. Shouting through a megaphone or passing a sweeping piece of historical legislation.
The big cinematic moments.
Exactly. But the text argues that most of the time, justice is quiet.
It's just normal life.
It's literally just paying your employees a fair, livable wage. It's refusing to engage in toxic workplace gossip that ruins someone's reputation.
Yeah.
It's being rigorously honest in your business dealings, respecting authority, and using whatever money you have responsibly and generously.
It completely democratizes the concept of justice, doesn't it?
It really does. It means you don't have to be a powerful politician or a wealthy philanthropist to enact biblical justice.
No, you enact it in your kitchen.
Right.
In how you speak to your spouse, and how you treat the cashier at the grocery store, and in how you manage your checkbook.
So what does this all mean when we put the pieces together? When you boil down everything this deep dive source material is telling us, justice in this ancient, biblical context, is just love with its work boots on.
Love with his work boots on. That is fantastic.
It is the highly practical, physical, structural, and sometimes gritty application of loving God and loving your neighbor.
I think that captures the author's intent perfectly.
Mhm.
It's about moving the internal, invisible reality of faith into the external, visible world where it can actually impact other people.
Let's recap the core progression that the author lays out right at the conclusion of the paper, because I think it serves as a beautiful, clarifying summary of everything we've discussed today.
Yeah.
The text says, "Let worship become obedience.
Right.
Let obedience become mercy.
Yes.
Let mercy become justice.
Uh-huh.
And let justice be grounded deeply in the cross." It's a continuous, unbreakable chain reaction.
A chain that links the eternal character of God directly to the daily, seemingly insignificant actions of humanity.
Now, as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with a final provocative thought.
Somebody to chew on.
Exactly. We've spent this time looking at how this text argues that true, sustainable social justice requires a transformed human heart, not just a change in legislation.
It requires a deep connection to a divine moral character.
So here is a thought for you in the days ahead. If we, as a modern society, try to build a perfectly just world using only secular laws while completely ignoring the moral order and the spiritual transformation that this text insists is absolutely necessary.
That's a big if.
Right. If we do that, are we just trying to build a house starting with the roof?
Oh, wow.
Can a society truly sustain a demanding, exhausting pursuit for justice when it forgets, or outright rejects, the foundational character of the God who defined what justice was in the first place?
It's a heavy question, and it fundamentally challenges the core assumptions of how almost everyone approaches social change today.
It really does. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep asking those big, difficult questions, keep digging past the headlines into the original sources, and never settle for the shallow scroll of information overload. We'll see you next time.